The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Joel Olandesca is an entrepreneur, business owner, event professional, event technology innovator, and the current chair of Canada's International Live Events Association, or ILEA. Joel is the creator and co-founder of SOS Charging Solutions and SOS Web.AR. SOS is known for providing mobile device charging at events across the globe, but for them it's more than just charging. Imagine an event where attendees are sitting on the floor next to a plug and are worried about how they're going to make their phones last until the end of the day. Now imagine your event where guests are provided with a charger conveniently placed on their table where they can use an event app, they can text their spouse, they can follow the sponsor on Instagram. In 2020, SOS Web.AR became another way that SOS is helping planners enhance the event experience. Joel is a passionate advocate for the events industry and the impact it has on the global economy and on culture. In our conversation today, we talked about not only the current state of events, but what can be designed and developed and reimagined for the future. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Connector Next Door. And I have so many great conversations every single week with people that are naturally connecting others together in such incredible ways. And Joel, you're influencing our community here in Calgary in very cool ways with all sorts of great connections and collaborations and things that you got your hands in. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Thanks, Lisa. I know we're going to have a great conversation, but yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on.
It's kind of cool because we've reconnected just over the last few months here, and you and I have been in the events world, in the what we call the events industry, for a long time, and seeing where you have unconventionally taken what connection means to another level. I would love to just start with really, what does connection mean to you?
For me, I look at it from a couple of different things. So there's obviously the physical side of it. So when you see at least one or two people hit it off and there's that spark and you see them take a conversation to crazy levels and stuff happens from there. But I also see it in other ways, right? So if I put something out there, how are you reacting to it? If I see you put something out there, how do I react to it? To me, that's connection in multiple different ways.
When you say putting something out there, are you meaning in a public sense? When somebody's sharing a message, sharing an idea, sharing a project, and then there is some kind of a public response? Or are you thinking one-on-one when you're having these conversations and somebody shares an idea and then it's coming back to you and there's that interaction that starts to happen?
And this is where we can go down those rabbit holes, right? Because in the way I think and the way I live, you can look at it from how I post things on social media, but it could also mean like how I perceive the way somebody looks at me when I walk into a room.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
So there's the physical, but also the non-physical part of connecting that I always consider.
I'm a big energy feeler, like when I just feel the vibe in a room.
And we talk about this all the time, to sort of stick to the subject of what our industry does. That's what makes or breaks a successful event, in my opinion, right? Is how much thought and how much forethought and thought has gone into when somebody enters into my event or your event or this event. What are you doing to make a person connect with another, rather than just having them walk to a seat and sit down?
Exactly. Well, and before, I think when we were having a conversation earlier, this idea that it doesn't happen by chance or by accident. I think when we orchestrate the way an event happens and a guest walks in, I would even say when our teams walk in or our volunteers walk in, depending on who's running this event, the way that things are structured, where the tables are, all of those details can help feed into that. How do we become that example for others in the room where we're being open with what we want to share and that we're open to someone else's sharing in return?
It applies to so many parts of our life. You know, we're talking about events, but if you apply that to everything else, work, for example, I'm in a co-working space and they put a lot of work into making sure that that's how we all feel when we walk in, for example.
One of the big reasons I wanted to have you on to have this conversation is you are a natural connector. You're somebody that from the outside and just knowing you personally, that you infuse that in everything you do, where people walk away from an interaction with you feeling that way, where they're like, oh, I feel so connected and I feel like Joel heard me. When you come to a conversation, you're ready to listen and you're ready to be there and see what else can be developed from it. I see that in so many parts of your life. Would you have called yourself a connector when you were younger? Is that something that that you would have said comes naturally to you? No?
No, far from it. And to be honest, it's even hard to hear that I'm a connector now, because for me, it really is just like being a good person. That's how we were raised, right? It's be a good person, be good to others. How do you feel when somebody comes up to you to ask you a question or talk about something and you're not given that full attention? Like, how do you feel? And I just don't, I know when I don't give somebody 100%, and I feel like I don't feel good about it afterwards. It takes a lot of learning and a lot of time to put yourself in that mode always. Because there's so many things that affect us from minute to minute, right? I could have received a crazy email prior to jumping on with you. And that could have totally affected my attitude.
Agreed.
During this whole entire recording.
What's so fascinating to me is that you said, well, you wouldn't call yourself a connector, but when you defined being a good person, it means that you're present, that you're showing up, that you want the best in that conversation, you want the best in the interaction with someone else, that they would leave feeling heard and seen. And the beauty of that is that in all of these conversations, it's really about the connector's way. Like what is in your DNA or your, sometimes it's nature or nurture, like where you were raised or what you saw in your early years that has just embedded that in who you are. We're not going to be living in that space all the time, but it seems like you really allow yourself naturally to go there where you want people to leave with a good feeling after an interaction with you.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's something that I wouldn't say I've worked hard on it because I'm a bad person. I don't think I'm a mean person that I have to work so hard to give everybody, give as many people as I can the attention that they deserve. But it's just, I don't know. I think just as a human being, than that, and am I simplifying it too much?
No, what's really
a big question.
No, exactly. Well, what's cool about it, when we mirror that in our communities, somebody that is the good neighbor, like we talk about the connector next door here. So it's really about walking over, having a visit, getting to know somebody. And how do you do that? How do you sort of make that tick or make that event work? Or you had that connection with this community association or you've started this business and it's having an effect on our community, not just a thank you, but how does that work? Oh, it just happens. How else would you do life but that way?
Life, what I've gone through has made me into the person that I am, obviously. But the whole giving back on behalf of the company, for example, that's something that I picked up from my corporate days, right? The corporation I was with when I was at the big T, if you want to call it that. During my time there, they still do it to this day. They spend a lot of time giving back to the community. And that was something that I took away when I left. And I remember saying to myself, when I start a company, I want to continue doing that. So that's something that I always bring to the team. Like, what are we doing to give back?
What an incredible example, though. they set a structure in place
Mhm.
that had that ripple effect in your life. And now tell us a little bit about the business that you're running. So SOS Charging Solutions is something that you've had for a while now. Tell us a little bit about the company, but then how are you implementing some of those things that you've learned in your corporate life into your business now that are just very natural ways for you to be giving back and connecting the community together?
Yeah. So SOS, two companies now, I guess. So SOS Charging Solutions has been around for 8 years. And what SOS Charging Solutions does is we provide mobile device charging at events. That's the front-facing part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really it's funny, this is the conversation we're having. Our tagline for SOS Charging is we charge, we brand, and we bring people together. Because
that's awesome.
The method of how we put our charging out at events and the devices that we use specifically, we have literally seen people come together, meet for the first time, talk, become friends or partners or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's for us, it's not just a charging company. For us, we are event professionals in what we do. We take a lot of knowledge that we've learned over the years and we apply that to what we do and how we deploy what we do on the charging and the things. The other business that we have is SOS Web Augmented Reality, or SOS Web.AR, which is a company that was born out of the pandemic. It was something that we were looking at pre-pandemic, but once the pandemic hit and we couldn't move any of our physical assets or charging stations, we started looking at our augmented reality solution a bit more. And at that point, it became a business. And here we are a year-ish later. And that's what we are fully focusing on at this time until live events become a big thing again.
I remember with SOS when I just launched the last issue of Moments Magazine last week. So this is all pretty fresh. Number 10 came out and it was our climb issue. But I was looking back on our launch that we did in 2015, and you were one of our sponsors with the SOS charging stations.
I remember.
And had branded them with the Moments brand. And I remember that exactly what you were just saying. Remember that being our conversation back then, that it's more than the technology that you've created and you have a product that you're renting, and it's something that is incredibly practical for people to plug in their phones. And at events, you're there for long hours sometimes. And I remember you saying that it really becomes the gathering place where people are waiting for their phones to charge, or they're having conversations about what's on their phone or who they're texting or whatever it is. And the beauty of that is that, again, that there is a way to orchestrate connections that matter, and a way to arrange not just a room, but the interaction between people in the room with a device like that. That it's really quite incredible when we think about how technology can serve us. And with AR, and this is brand new, so I know we've talked about it just a tiny bit, but are you seeing the same thing in using that technology to connect people together as well?
Yeah, so we've talked about that as a team. It's like, okay, so if on the charging side, we're known for bringing people together, is AR doing that same thing? And we've come to the realization that yes, the way we're using it is bringing people together. And I'll give you some examples. So for virtual events, it's been very successful for virtual events. So just very quick, when you receive a home kit, for example, so a box at home for your virtual event, we've worked with a number of different companies and clients, and we've activated augmented reality on top of that box. So stuff comes alive, right? So a still image, when you hold your phone over, it comes alive. Where we're seeing people come together is the sharing of that. So conversations are, once the virtual event starts, if people are looking for ways to connect, the augmented reality activation is a great icebreaker that people are using. So they're sometimes they don't have anything to say. So the first thing they'll ask is, "Oh, did you scan the box?" And like, "Yeah, I loved it." And we're seeing it from afar that people are starting to connect that way. It was recently used at a live event, the augmented reality. Obviously, definitely, if you're at a live event and you're interacting with other people, what we were witnessing was as soon as somebody was viewing it and reacting to the augmented reality, that helped draw people around. And then afterwards, there was even, again, there's stuff to be talked about, right? So,
Right.
and I think that's one of the things that we learn when we're networking 101. Try to find something that can link you with that other person.
As you're describing it, it's kind of funny. I did an event for a camp when I first started my business. This is like 12, almost actually 13 years ago in Winnipeg. And it was for a camp, and we were trying to find like youth, kid kind of stuff that we could be adding as part of the interactions before. And at the time it was video games. I'm not a big video game player, but video games that we had on a literal screen. And then people were playing the games and could compete with each other while others were getting their drinks, that you could see what was going on the screen. And it was so fun and interactive, but you had all ages there, and the early adopters, and then the ones that are watching and getting ready to adopt, and the others that sort of trail along and are watching what's happening. What you're describing here is so much like that, because when we were doing sort of this old school video game thing, you would have all sorts of people that are not going to play. But like you say, it gives them that opportunity to have a dialogue, or something's funny, or it's surprising, or there's movement. What a cool space that you are able to create.
It's sort of that, I forget what it's called, but there's that effect. And the thing that comes to mind visually for me in my brain is there's one person in a crowd, and nobody's dancing, but as soon as that one person starts dancing, it creates this chain effect, right? So that all of a sudden the whole crowd is dancing with one another. It's sort of that type of thing.
Simon Sinek, I think, is the one that kind of showed a video of somebody at a folk fest or something like that was actually dancing on the hill.
Yeah, you're right.
And we forget sometimes that not everyone's going to lean in and jump in and, with both feet and take on an experience, that we have to sometimes allow people to warm up. And when we talk about natural connection in a community, that's exactly also what happens, where you'll have the people that are willing to stand out and maybe look a bit foolish and, take on something, or entrepreneurs. You and I are both entrepreneurs, and we start something and then we do our best to kind of figure things out as we're, flying. But then there's other people that are like, oh, Joel has figured this piece out, or look at how he's connecting with these people. What if we were to partner or collaborate or whatever? It really kind of becomes this organic growth where everyone feels a part of it. And even those that might consider themselves introverts, or where they're a little bit shy about being part of an event, they still walk away. Like we were saying earlier, they still walk away with that feeling like, oh, that was really great. And I had a great time. And I felt like I was part of something. Your wife, Alicia, is really part of this mix. Do you find that sometimes you have different ways of connecting, different ways of wanting to bring people together in the business sense? Or are you pretty well aligned with how you're showing up and how that actually filters then through to the work that you're doing?
No, there's definitely a difference. And we are very, very different. When we walk into a room, we have very, very different ways of being in that room. So for example, I'm the bumblebee that floats around.
Okay.
And Alicia will find somebody, and I'll look over 2 hours later and she's still talking to the same person. That's how we go through our conversations. And there's nothing wrong with each of the ways we do it. That's just who we are as people.
It's cool to see the balance, though, because when we're talking about the early adopters and those that are looking on, and for you as a couple to understand the whole spectrum, because really connection isn't just one thing, and what makes one person feel connected might make someone feel disconnected. Like the bumblebee might make someone, if I want to have a deep conversation with you, but my aunt used to be like that, bumblebeeing around, but somebody that might feel like they are not sure who to talk to, you show up and you have a great connection with somebody, even though you're moving on to another conversation or into another room or whatever that looks like. You've given them a gift in that moment where they now feel like, oh, well, somebody saw me, maybe I'll have a conversation with someone else. Do you ever feel like the guy dancing on the hill, where you are the one, you're the one where you're like, I feel like there is something going on here, and you.
I don't think let me think about that. I'm gonna lean to no, because I normally am not the starter. I'm not the
interesting.
igniter.
And what would make you say that?
We talk about this on the team all the time as well, like between Mike and Alicia and I, we always talk about like content, right? Let's generate content. And the first thing that always says, first thing that always comes out of my mouth is, hey, if you have content, go build it, because go build it and then pass it over to me, and then I'll take it from there, sort of thing. Because I have learned over the years that I'm not good at being the starter of that kind of thing. It has to do with me just being shy. That's what it is. I'll let a couple others start, and then I'll join in.
And maybe you're doing it in community, so you feel like, you're not necessarily stepping out and dancing on the hill and, hoping somebody's going to join, but you rally people around you where the movement is happening. And it's very obvious from the outside that movement is happening and that there's new ways of thinking. And I think when we talk about the events world, there has to be movement and there has to be readjustment. And how do we look at, I think in a broader sense, what does it mean to really connect at an event? And how do we become those ambassadors of connection, that the events industry is so perfectly positioned to showcase what that even could look like moving forward. Now that you are the chair of the Canada board for ILEA now, what do you think connection is going to look like for events coming up?
It's going to be amazing.
I love that answer.
Human beings are just dying to reconnect in that way, in face-to-face situations. That's not to say that's happening yet, though, unfortunately. The events industry is, in my opinion, the hardest hit. First to shut down, and it'll be the last to get restarted. You've probably heard that many times, and many people will say that. And I truly believe that's a fact. You are seeing events happen, and it's based on region and where they're happening and the type of events that are happening, right? There was a huge conference last week for event professionals in Las Vegas, IMEX. Normally you see a lot of people sharing content around the content that they're picking up. Everybody was talking about how great it was to see each other again in person. That's what we were seeing. That's what I was seeing across LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, right? People were sharing the moments of reconnecting. And of course, there were people saying, guess what I learned? This is what I saw. And this was the experience that I had. Those are all great. But what I'm saying is the majority of people that were sharing their experience there was all about reconnecting and connecting with other human beings.
It just kind of gives me chills when I think about what that actually means to come back together again. And I'm talking, it could be thousands of people, or it could be 5 people at a workshop that somebody might be running. And what that actually means for us to re-engage and really find our feet again as an industry. So when we talk about the events industry, people that are doing this professionally, that their livelihood is really hinged on this. Many of the people I work with are the people that are doing events on the side of their desk, or they're working with a nonprofit volunteer team, or they're an entrepreneur, or they're an author and they're running a book launch. I'm hearing the same thing from my Candy community, is where there's some nervousness on doing it right. There's some pressure from their communities in some cases to reconvene. Their members or their audience wants to see them, or they want to be together again. What I would love to see is sort of some in the industry, and whether we all are dancing on the top of the hill together, where we're saying there's hope. And exactly what you said, it's going to be amazing when we start to see that resurgence again, and people start to awaken to what events can be and how these are incredible connecting points for our customers, our donors. If you're in a nonprofit, that there's opportunities now. Things have shifted and changed, but I do believe that the essential part of what you're just saying here at an events conference, where these are event planners who are learning and they want to, have the cutting edge information, the conversation is about being together again. What a beautiful space, I think, for our world as we start to reopen. And I have friends all over the world that, everyone's kind of trying their version of what does reopening and re-engaging in events look like. It's so important to me to see that there's that openness to really almost like an entrepreneur would, like you probably did at the beginning, kind of build some things as you go, as you see the needs opening up. And as people are really trying to find what does connection mean moving forward, that we're open to maybe even doing things a little bit differently.
And things are gonna, it's true. So I have an alternate ego. I'm a DJ.
Right.
And I'll tell you,
wow.
I'll tell you, this past summer, I was out every weekend at weddings DJing for couples.
Okay.
That alone proved to me that the power of bringing people together. There were nights where some dance floors were empty for half of the night, and the reason for that wasn't because of the music I was playing.
If you had booked Joel as your DJ,
it was because people hadn't seen each other in a year or a year and a half, so they were all at their tables visiting with one another.
Wow.
And when as a DJ and as other DJs, we've had this conversation, how was your night? We have all realized that the dance floor was empty for a good portion of the night because people have been wanting to get together and learn. Like when you learn those different nuances from one another, you're able to give yourself a bit more forgiveness in terms of how something, how the performance was. If there's one thing to take away, depending on what your role is in this industry, is give yourself that room for learning. And if you see that something is different now versus to what it was pre-pandemic, there's a reason for that. Find out what that reason is and build that into your change, right? Because it's if you are saying, quote unquote, I can't wait for things to get back to normal, that things aren't going back to normal. They're shifting and they're changing to be a new thing. And if you look at it from that perspective, I think, I just think that you'll feel better. You'll allow yourself to feel better when you can see that that things aren't going to be the way they used to be. Right. And I'm even talking to colleagues now who are running hybrid events, and they're seeing and they're learning post event that it's not as easy as running a live event and just throwing a Zoom camera on.
Mm-hmm.
You have to consider both audience. Virtual attendees are feeling left out because everybody live is being tended to, but virtual attendees are being left behind. So, right, that kind of talk that and I'm sure we all hear it from one another. Well, we all have to take inventory of all these things that we're learning, and that'll just make things will just get better, I think.
And honestly, I would guess that they would, if they were to ask or have a conversation with you after you were at a wedding, you were the DJ, and they probably would say that they loved having you there. So sometimes when we might perceive it as it's not happening the way that it used to happen, how come people aren't on the dance floor? And the cues that we get from the audience, or the cues that we would be getting from, the wedding party, or the guests there, might be different now, and to wait and not necessarily attach judgment to it yet.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that you had music, and I would guess you would adapt the music to, if no one's on the dance floor, you'll adapt to that. And so you're giving them the gift of not just reading the room, but giving them an experience that fits with where they want to be. And isn't that what we're all really should be doing? When we're planning an event, that we're kind of coming back to where we had started, just that idea that when we can leave the way things should happen to really how they could happen, and where this connection could actually become something where they would have left the wedding or room and that experience feeling like, oh, it was so amazing to connect. They might not actually pinpoint that it was you setting the stage or the atmosphere, but it gave them the opportunity to reconnect in a way that was meaningful to them.
Correct.
What an incredible experience for you to carry all of these different experiences and be learning from them, and how that is applying to your world as an event professional, and what you are then giving, in the context of being on the board with ILEA. And as we're all in this together, as we keep saying and have been saying for 2 years, Sometimes I'm like, well, do we all want to sort of just get off? Like if we're all in the boat together, let's just get off and take a tour on the island for a little while, have a little bit of a break. But the reality is it's good. It's good to be in community. It's good to have these conversations. And I so appreciate you being here with me today and just going there with me a bit on what does connection mean to you and hearing a little bit of your heart around what you've learned over the years and how community fits into all of this and the importance of that. I really appreciate your time to talk through that with us. I think we'll be having more conversations and there's going to be more pivots and changes and adjustments that we have to all make over time. But I so appreciate having you here to have this specific conversation about connection.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate you having me on as well. And I always enjoy the talks that we have.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about SOS, about ILEA, about your DJ services? How can they get a hold of you?
You can, let's see, if you can email me, Joel at soschargingsolutions.com. I'm on social for SOS. It's at Take Charge SOS, and that's on all platforms. And then me personally, Joel Olandesca, first name, last name.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be watching where you're going next, and I might be on the top of the hill with you and your all of your friends.
How about you start the dance, and then I'll join in. There we go.
Only if you promise to join in. I have been on the top of the hill a few times, and I'm like, okay, everybody, we have to change the music.
I will join in. Guaranteed. I will join in.
That's awesome. It's a deal. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to add all of the links and everything to the comments here as this gets posted. And for all of you that are listening, stay posted on where Joel's going in the future. Both him and Alicia are really at the forefront of what this means to do events well and to connect well. And it just has been great to have that conversation. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.